Before I begin the video, I just want to take a quick moment to say I've always tried to be incredibly careful when making these videos. These topics can be incredibly difficult to discuss, and it's really easy to upset people without even meaning to do so. I can't tell you how many videos I've put on private or just never published because I questioned some aspect of that video, which is why I've opened this channel to memberships where members would have access to all of those videos along with early access and sneak peeks to my upcoming videos. I might even throw in a members only live stream from time to time. But if memberships aren't for you and you really want to support this channel, you could always do so by leaving a tip in the tip jar, by clicking on the thanks option, or honestly just hitting the like button because it really does go a long way to help. I appreciate each and every one of you. So with that being said, grab a cup of coffee and let's get into the video, shall we?
A strange new twist in the murders of two young girls in Delphi, Indiana.
Attorneys for the man charged in the case say it wasn't him. Instead, he says the girls were sacrificed as part of a pagan ritual by a white nationalist group. In court filings today, attorneys for Richard Allen accuse investigators of ignoring critical evidence from the scene, linking the killings to a group called Odinism.
The countless theories, speculation, and subjective opinions surrounding the Delphi case being posted day after day feel a lot like repeating a word over and over again until it eventually starts to lose all of its meaning, until that word almost starts to feel like it's unrecognizable from how it started out. Garrett Kurtz, Paul Letter, James Bryan Chadwell, Thomas Bruce, Anthony Schatz, Ron Logan, the LaFons, the Professor, the Mayor, Daniel Nations, Pat Brown, the Maxwells, Tobe Lesenby, Mark Redwine, Patrick Westfall, Brad Holder, Johnny Messer, Elvis Fields, Richard Allen. Every single one of those people I mentioned have had numerous people here online who fervently defended their belief that that person was, in fact, the bridge guy. And honestly, I can make an easy argument for just about every single one of them as well, but they all can't be the bridge guy. All of the theories can't coexist together, because only one answer is the right one. The state of Indiana believes that the actual answer is this man, while the defense claimed it was a group of white supremacist Odinists, and obviously both can't be true at the same time. Either one or none are real. In a previous video that I posted a long time ago, I said that I truly believed that when someone was arrested, that the state of Indiana wasn't going to just have to prove that that person was guilty, but the state was also going to need to prove that the nearly endless list of suspects weren't guilty. Because regardless of whatever evidence was actually presented, any decent defense attorney could just pick a suspect's name out of a hat and attempt to use them for reasonable doubt. However, out of all the theories and suspects that litter the Delphi case, the only theory capable of challenging Richard Allen's numerous confessions is the Odinism theory. Because without the idea of Odinists coercing Allen into confessing, any debate about Allen's guilt would have ended a long time ago. And regardless of your opinion about the case, I'm sure most of you can admit that the defense was well aware of that fact.
New here at 5 o'clock, we are learning more about the reported confessions made by Delphi murder suspect Richard Allen. He is accused of killing Abigail Williams and Liberty German in February of 2017. According to court documents released today, during a phone call made from prison, Allen told his wife multiple times that he killed the girls. Previously, his lawyers attributed these confessions to Allen's declining mental state.
Recently, Detective Click from Rushville stated under oath that he had found a video of someone being abducted at gunpoint on Johnny Messer's phone. Johnny being one of the men the defense team has accused of being an Odinist involved in the crime. And it's not like the video in question was a rumor either, because apparently Detective Click had actually seen it himself, and as it would turn out, law enforcement were apparently not able to identify the person being abducted in that video, and thus there were no charges that were able to be filed, which I mean, it's absolutely insane. Right now, all we know is that the person in the video wasn't Abby or Libby, but that video, for obvious reasons, it got a lot of attention in the public in a pretty big way. When all of this originally came out, most people online were pretty much in agreement that we didn't understand how police could find a video like that of someone being abducted, and yet somehow no one got arrested for it. It's horrifying, and while I'm no legal expert, I truly can't understand how a video like that can even exist and someone not be in jail over it. Needless to say, the defense team jumped all over that video, which is fair. I mean, what are the odds that someone who's potentially connected to the Delphi case abducted someone on a video and they weren't somehow involved in the Delphi case? On the surface, it feels like if that video is real, then surely this Johnny Messer guy has to be involved, right? But when you really think about it, even if it turns out that Messer really is some monster who actually did something like that on a video, it still doesn't mean that he's this monster. For instance, this is Garrett Kurtz, who is convicted of killing not one, but two people, and here he is standing on Ron Logan's property, hundreds of feet from where they found Abby and Libby's bodies, because apparently he went to Ron Logan's house all the time. What are the odds that not one, but two double homicide killers happened to visit Ron Logan's land? And if you're thinking it's zero, you'd be wrong, because law enforcement have never once mentioned Kurtz's potential involvement in Abby and Libby's deaths. Then there's James Brian Chadwell, a sicko who kidnapped a young girl towns away from Delphi and did unspeakable things, and oh yeah, this is one of Chadwell's tattoos. Does it look familiar? I mean, what are the odds? But turns out everything seems to point to him not actually being connected to Delphi at all. Then there's Thomas Bruce, a serial killer who drove past the Freedom Bridge quite often, who liked to dress exactly like the bridge guy, but apparently he's not involved either. I could go on and on. But as far as we know, law enforcement claim that Richard Allen is the only person with physical evidence tying him to the crime scene. Not Garrett Kurtz or Chadwell or Odinus, only Richard Allen.
The probable cause affidavit for Richard Allen says the Indiana State Police Laboratory determined the unspent round has been cycled through Richard Allen's Sig Sauer P226. This is what the handgun looks like. Retired IMPD Detective Sergeant Greg Arkins tells us when a round or shell casing is ejected from a firearm, that leaves distinct marks, even if it isn't fired.
Whenever a person unloads a gun that's loaded with a round in the chamber, then when you pull back on the slide, the extractor grabs a hold, and the extractor is made of hard metal, where the shell casing is made of slightly softer metal, so it leaves very unique microscopic striations on the shell casing.
The term striation, those are marks, scratches?
Correct. It's a sometimes microscopic, but it's, the mark that an extractor will make.
How reliable is this information, that ejection information from a gun?
I'm not a firearms examiner, but from my experience, I found it's like 98, 99%.
All of which ties in directly with my next point, which is this man, Elvis Fields, who is also one of the men the defense team claim was one of the three Odinists truly responsible for the crime. It's alleged that Elvis told family members that he was involved, and at one point he asked a police officer that if they found his spit on one of the girls' bodies but he could explain it away, would he still get in trouble, which, I mean, that's one hell of a thing to say. But if what Elvis said was true, then when law enforcement found his DNA at the scene, just like Elvis said they would, this case would have been over a long time ago. But as far as we know, Elvis's DNA wasn't found at the crime scene, because if it was, call it a hunch, at the least the defense would have mentioned it in their court filings. Not that it would have mattered, not that there ever would have been court filings, because the police would have absolutely arrested him. But many would say that Elvis, who's mentally challenged, apparently gave details about the crime that only the killer could have known. However, when you start to look into the details that Elvis gave, very real issues start to appear almost immediately. No one has ever been able to positively place Elvis or any of the people Elvis claimed he was with at the bridge on the day of the murders. Witnesses who saw Bridge Guy only saw one man entering. Geofencing data doesn't place any of the men Elvis mentioned at the crime scene, because the defense again would have definitely brought this up in their documents. It appears that his claim about spitting on the bodies isn't true. He never mentioned blood on trees or runes with sticks. The thing that he did mention, though, was that he had placed sticks on top of Abigail Williams' head to represent antlers, and there were in fact twigs lying horizontally in Abigail Williams' hair in a pattern very similar to this. But jumping up in an aha moment isn't exactly being genuine to what Elvis actually said compared to what things actually looked like. There were sticks and twigs all over the ground. The killer dressed Abby in 2 layers of clothing which had been lying on that ground. The twigs in question were thinner than a toothpick, and there were countless other twigs just like them littered all over the ground around her. The idea that they had got caught in her hair when the killer redressed her is extremely plausible. However, and perhaps more importantly, tiny horizontal twigs forming this pattern aren't exactly representative of antlers, now are they? You have to make some pretty big creative leaps to suggest that this pattern represents horns or antlers. But frankly, the defense had no choice but to suggest that, because unless these horizontal twigs were antlers, then absolutely nothing Elvis said even remotely was accurate. But maybe more important than arguing about subjective stick interpretations in the woods would be to ask ourselves why. If Odinists really did do this, and they left stick runes and marks on trees to take credit for these 2 girls' murders, then why are they trying to frame someone else who isn't an Odinist? I mean, really think about it. If your argument is that the crime scene is occultic in nature intentionally, and that these Odinists have so much power they can actually frame people, wouldn't it make sense for them to frame, I don't know, like an ex-Odinist or someone that they didn't like who practiced Odinism? Why frame some random guy that nobody's ever heard of, a guy who's claimed in court documents that he's never even heard of Odinists or Odinism before this? Or in other words, why would they pick Richard Allen? Don't get me wrong, when I challenge things the defense claims, I'm not doing it just for the sake of arguing or to push some narrative that Richard Allen is definitively guilty. I do it because the truth should be able to stand up to scrutiny, and that goes both ways. Because as of right now, the strongest evidence against Richard Allen are his confessions and the bullet found at the crime scene matching his gun. And since none of us know the details of his confessions, it's difficult to even talk about that aspect of this. However, injection marking forensics are highly contentious, and regardless of what you personally think about the science behind matching unspent rounds, I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying that I'm not convinced something like that is going to be enough to get a jury to convict him. As I mentioned earlier in this video and in previous videos, I've always been worried that regardless of who was arrested, the state wouldn't have to just show that that person was guilty, but they would need to prove that someone else wasn't guilty. But arguments presented about someone else are not arguments made for or against Richard Allen. The evidence that the state comes to trial with against Richard Allen should be the only focus of the jury, and it should be able to stand up to criticism and scrutiny like anything else. Because that evidence is the only reason they went to trial in the first place, and ignoring it or refusing to address it by replacing and inserting other suspects is just smoke and mirrors. At least to me, it comes across as the defense team using suspects as shields to deflect from challenging the actual evidence against their client. And here in May, hopefully we all get to know what that actual evidence is in its entirety. And I hope so much that facts and evidence brought against Richard Allen aren't subjective or open to interpretation like twigs caught in some poor murdered kid's hair. Because sending a man to prison for life, or even possibly executing him, shouldn't be based in feelings and speculation, just like those things shouldn't be used to clear him either. I just hope so much that the evidence will speak for itself and not get overshadowed or deflected with conspiracy after conspiracy that are repeated again and again and again until that evidence, much like a word repeated too many times, eventually loses all of its meaning. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching.